Lady Serena stood on the cold metal floor of Galactic Station Tormenine. Her long, black mourning robe dragged behind her like a shadow that refused to leave. She was still, too still, like a statue placed in the middle of a market that had forgotten her. Around her, life moved fast. Aliens traded goods, shouted prices, and walked past her as if she didn't exist. She was the last widow of the Torvalin War. Her warrior husband had died in battle. His body was never recovered, only his burned armor returned. According to tradition, she now stood for one purpose: to be claimed by another house or warrior. If no one offered to take her, she would be exiled, alone and dishonored. But no one came. Aliens passed by with blank faces. Even her own kind, the proud Torvalins, refused to look her in the eye. To them, she was a burden, a symbol of failure. A widow without a clan was like a cracked blade, useless, dangerous, and unwanted. Serena's heart beat slowly. She could feel each thump in her chest, like a countdown to her shame. The ceremonial time was running out. She only had one more rotation, less than a full day, before the officials would escort her off the station and onto the exile transport beneath her robe. A small hand clutched her leg tightly. Her daughter, little Vera, was hidden under the folds of silk. The child was silent, her large eyes watching the world with fear. She hadn't spoken in days. The trauma of losing her father and living in hiding had taken her words. All she had left was her mother, and now even that was slipping away. Serena bent slightly and whispered, "It's okay, my light, stay close." The girl nodded, but didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't breathe loudly. She had learned to become invisible, just like her mother. "Do you need food, widow?" A cold voice asked mockingly from the side. It was one of the merchant guards. He tossed a dry ration block at her feet. Not out of kindness, but as a joke. The crowd laughed. Some even recorded the moment on their holodevices. Serena didn't move. She didn't show pain. That was the rule. Widows must remain strong, even when broken inside. But in the corner of the hall, someone else was watching. A human, Captain Elias Knox, leaned against a crate, arms crossed. His uniform was old, patched in places. His boots were dusty from long travel. But his eyes, they were sharp, focused, and filled with quiet anger. He had been on this station for less than a week, here to deliver cargo from Earth's outer colonies. He hadn't planned to get involved in alien politics. But something about the widow made him stay longer than he should. Elias didn't know her story, but he had seen enough war to recognize pain. He had watched her stand there for hours, ignored, insulted, humiliated, all while trying to protect a child hidden behind her legs. He took a deep breath, then stepped forward. People noticed immediately. The crowd quieted. Even the merchant, who mocked Serena, froze for a moment. The human was walking toward the widow. Serena's eyes met his, tired, wary, unsure. Elias stopped a few steps in front of her and said, "Are you waiting for someone to claim you?" A few in the crowd laughed. "Again, what's it to you, human?" Someone hissed, "You don't understand our ways." Elias ignored them. He kept his eyes on the woman. "I don't know your customs," he admitted, "but I know what it feels like to be left behind." Serena blinked. Her lips trembled. For just a moment, then she whispered, "No one comes." Captain Elias knelt down, slowly, trying not to frighten the small girl behind her. He reached into his pack and pulled out a sealed food bar. He unwrapped it and offered it to the child beneath the robe. The girl hesitated, then reached out with shaking fingers and took it. She bit into it with small, desperate bites, like a starving animal afraid it might disappear. "She's hungry," Elias said softly, "and scared." "She has no future without a clan," Serena said flatly. "Neither do I." "Then maybe it's time to change the rules." Elias replied. The station lights buzzed above them. No one spoke for a long time. The human had crossed a line and everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The crowd didn't speak, but their eyes burned with judgment, some with disgust, others with curiosity. A human had dared to approach a widow, something no one had seen in over 100 cycles. It wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. But Elias didn't care. He didn't move away. He stood close to Lady Serena and her daughter, as if shielding them from the eyes and whispers around. The child behind her, still chewing the food bar he gave, peeked out slowly from beneath the heavy black mourning robe. She was small, far too thin for her age, her skin pale with the soft bluish hue of her race. Her eyes were large, too large, filled with silent fear that only those who had survived war could understand. Elias crouched again, his tone gentle. "Hi there." The little girl looked at him, but said nothing. Serena whispered, "Her name is Vera. She has not spoken since her father died. She saw him fall." Elias asked quietly. Serena nodded. Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled as they brushed her daughter's cheek. "She was hiding when the attack happened. He died protecting both of us." Elias looked around the station at the aliens, who kept their distance, pretending not to care, but watching with sharp eyes. "And now no one wants to protect either of you." "That is the way of my people," Serena replied. "Widows without family are seen as damaged, unclean. Their children are considered weak. Only a formal claim can change that, but no one will make it." Elias stood again, his voice firmer. This time, "Maybe your people need someone to remind them what honor looks like." A sharp laugh echoed behind him. A tall alien, one of the Torvaline officials, stepped forward. His armor gleamed with ceremonial gold, but his eyes were cold. "And you think you, a human, can lecture us about honor?" He spat. "You know nothing of our ways. Earthborn, I know enough," Elias replied. "I know that leaving a widow and a child to starve is not honorable. I know that watching a child go hungry because of ancient pride is not strength. It's weakness." The official's face twitched, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned and barked something in his native tongue to the others nearby. Several warriors gathered, armor clinking, hands resting on stun staves and plasma knives. Serena stepped slightly in front of her daughter, her body tense. "Captain, they won't fight you here. Not in the open, but they will try later. They believe I've shamed them by accepting your kindness." Elias shrugged. "Let them try. I faced worse." He looked down at Vera again and extended his hand, not to touch, but simply to offer. "Do you want to come with me?" "Just for now, just to walk away from this place." The child hesitated. Her small fingers clutched her mother's robe. Her eyes moved from Elias to the crowd, then to her mother's face. Serena nodded gently. "It's okay, little one." Vera reached out and took Elias's hand. It was the first time she had touched anyone outside her mother in months. Gasps echoed through the station floor. She accepted the touch. Someone whispered, "Is that a binding?" Another asked. "No," said the official harshly. "Not yet. It's not legal unless the widow speaks the ritual phrase and the human repeats it." Elias looked at Serena. "And what if I did? What if I claimed you both?" The widow stared at him in silence. The lights of the station reflected off her tear-lined eyes. She had been strong for so long, carried her child, her grief, her shame. Now a stranger offered to carry some of it for her. Her lips parted, voice low and unsure. "Do you understand what that means? You would become our guardian, our clan. You would be responsible for our survival, legally." "Spiritually, I know," Elias said, "and I wouldn't offer if I wasn't ready." Serena looked at her daughter again. Vera didn't speak, but she gave a small nod, a brave one, and that nod was enough. Serena turned to Elias, placed her right hand over her heart, and said the ancient phrase, "I stand alone, broken by fate. Will you claim what others threw away?" Elias didn't hesitate. "I will, and I won't throw it away," he said. The station erupted in noise, shouts, arguments, panic. The official roared something in fury. But the ritual was done. The widow was claimed. The child was no longer alone, and the human had just rewritten an ancient rule. Silence didn't last long after the ritual words were spoken. The entire trade floor buzzed like an angry hive. The widow had been claimed not by one of her own kind, but by a human. The officials were frozen in disbelief. The traders and warriors whispered among themselves, stunned and disgusted. A group of elder Torvalins gathered quickly near the claim platform. Their ceremonial robes swayed as they walked with purpose. Their expressions were tight with disapproval. One of them, Elder Vorn, raised his staff, the metal rings around. It clanged together like a warning bell. "This is unacceptable," he declared. "The ritual has been corrupted. No human may claim one of our own, especially not a widow." Elias stood tall, his hands still gently holding Vera's small fingers. "Your own laws say that if no one from your people makes an offer before the mourning period ends, anyone can step forward. That law was written before your kind even arrived in this sector," Vorn growled. "It was meant for allies, not off-world scavengers." "I didn't write your law," Elias replied, his voice calm but firm. "But I followed it." Serena stood silently beside him, her hands folded across her chest. She looked so still, but her mind raced, in all her training, in all the history lessons of her people. There had never been a moment like this, a human claiming a widow and her child. Another elder, a female named Yavra, narrowed her eyes. "You would take them? A woman who holds no dowry, no land, and a silent child with no future." Elias didn't even blink. "Yes," he said. Gasps rippled through the crowd again. Yavra stepped closer. "Why?" she asked. "What could you possibly gain from them?" Elias looked at Serena for a moment, then back to the elders. "Sometimes what you gain isn't gold or power. Sometimes it's simply doing what's right." That answer didn't sit well with many. The warriors at the edge of the platform murmured, their hands tightening on their weapons. "To you, this may be a kind gesture." Vorn hissed, "To us, it is shame. A widow must be claimed by a house worthy of her bloodline. You are an outsider, lower than a servant in our eyes. Then maybe your eyes need fixing." Elias shot back, "Because from where I stand, leaving a woman and child to starve isn't noble, it's cowardice." Serena's heart pounded. She had never heard anyone speak to the elders like that, not even her late husband. A sudden voice rose from the side of the crowd, rough and bitter. "He only wants her because she's desperate." Everyone turned. A tall, armored Torvalin warrior stepped out. He was muscular, scarred, and wore a symbol showing he had once served beside Serena's husband in battle. His name was Daralek, and he had always hated humans. "Your kind has no honor, Daralek." Spat. "You scavenge our wars, steal from our dead, and now you think you can steal our widows." "I didn't steal anyone," Elias said, stepping slightly in front of Serena and Vera. "She chose, and you had your chance. All of you did, and none of you stepped forward." Daralek's eyes narrowed. "That child should be raised as one of us, not dragged around by a human who doesn't even understand our ways." Elias met his glare without fear. "Then you should have cared before today." The tension on the platform grew thick, like a storm cloud ready to burst. The warriors behind Daralek shifted, some unsure, others angry. Serena finally spoke, loud and clear. "Enough." Her voice silenced the platform. "I stood alone for many rotations," she said. "I waited for someone, anyone, to offer a place for me and my daughter. But you all turned your faces, whispered your shame, and walked away." She looked at the elders, then the warriors. Captain Elias didn't come for gain. He came because my child was hungry and I was tired of being invisible. She stepped forward, holding her daughter close. He may not wear our armor, but he carries something most of you have forgotten: mercy. The crowd didn't cheer. But they didn't stop her either. For the first time in days, no one looked away from her. They looked at her and saw her, and beside her, the human who dared to see value where others saw shame. The ritual had been spoken. The claim had been made. But still, no one moved. Serena stood tall beside Elias, her hand resting protectively on Vera's shoulder. Around them, the alien crowd buzzed with growing unrest. The Torvalin elders looked like statues carved in fury, and the warriors behind them gripped their weapons tighter. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was rebellion building in silence. One of the junior officials, younger and nervous, whispered. The law was followed. Technically, Elder Vorn turned his sharp eyes on the boy. Technically. He barked. That law was never meant to be used by outsiders, especially not for something as sacred as a widow's claiming. But it is still law, Elias said calmly. You've had centuries to change it. You didn't. A bitter laugh escaped another elder. We never thought anyone from the outside would be foolish enough to try. Or brave enough, Serena added quietly. The words cut deep. Yavra? The elder priestess of the Torvalin circle stepped forward now. Her face was not angry like the others, but her eyes carried sadness and warning. You've shaken something that was meant to stay still. Human, she said. This is not just about rules. This is about identity, tradition, control. Elias didn't flinch. I didn't come here to break your world. I just couldn't stand by and watch a woman and a child be thrown away like garbage. Yavra's gaze turned toward Vera, who clung quietly to her mother's side. Her voice softened. She is just a child, and yet because of this choice, her life will never be simple. She deserves a life, not just survival, Elias said. If that's a problem for your tradition, maybe the tradition is the problem. Gasps filled the platform again. A few younger aliens traders, not warriors, nodded slightly in agreement. They had seen the widow's suffering. Some had even felt ashamed, but had done nothing. Now someone had done something, and they were forced to look at themselves. Elder Vorn slammed his staff in two. The metal floor, the sound rang like thunder. Enough. The ritual was corrupted. I move that the claiming be nullified by council vote. A sudden hush fell that was serious. It meant the council would publicly reject the human's claim. They would erase the ritual as if it never happened. And if that happened, the widow would be exiled again, this time with no chance of being claimed by anyone, not even Elias. Serena's eyes widened. You can't. We can, Vorn snapped, and we will. But then something unexpected happened. A small hand reached out, thin and trembling. Vera stepped forward, pulling herself from her mother's side. Her voice was tiny, broken, but it was there, clear and strong enough to silence the platform. Don't take him away, she whispered. He gave me food. He looked at me. Like I mattered, even the most hardened warriors looked away. Vera hadn't spoken in weeks, maybe longer. The pain of war had taken her voice, and this moment gave it back. Elias knelt beside her, gently placing his hand over hers. It's all right, little one, he said. You're safe. Elder Yavra closed her eyes. Her voice cracked just slightly. By Torvalin law, once a child speaks in favor of a guardian, the council cannot override the ritual unless there is evidence of deception. There is none. The nervous young official said quietly. Everything was done by the book. Vorn's hand trembled on his staff. His pride was bleeding, but he had no counter-argument left. He turned to Elias, fury in his voice. Then you are their clan now, human, their protector. Their shame and burden belongs to you. Elias rose slowly, standing beside Serena and Vera. "They are not a burden," he said. "They are my honor." The crowd didn't cheer, but they didn't resist either. Something had changed. Something. Permanent, a custom had been challenged, and in its place, a new path had opened. The widow was no longer unwanted, the child no longer invisible, and the human who claimed them had just become a legend no one saw coming. The station lights dimmed as artificial night began across Galactic Station Tormenine. Shops closed, corridors quieted, and the great trading floor emptied, but not the whispers. The claiming of the widow had become the only thing people talked about. In back rooms and smoky lounges, aliens muttered in low tones. The human embarrassed the elders. He broke sacred custom. He's dangerous. But what they didn't say out loud was that some of them agreed with him. And that was the real threat. Elias walked through the lower corridors with quiet steps. His boots echoed faintly on the steel floors. Behind him, Serena and little Vera followed. They had left the trade floor hours ago, escorted to a temporary shelter, a small room meant for traders in transit. It wasn't much, but it was better than the cold public spaces where Serena had stood alone for days. Now they were together under the same roof. And yet, the danger had only just begun. Elias opened the door to their room and let them in first. The moment Vera stepped inside, she rushed to the small sleep couch and hugged the blanket tight. She didn't speak, but the way she moved told Elias everything. This was the first time in days she felt safe. Serena looked around quietly. "You didn't have to do all this, Captain," she said. "I would have survived." Elias shook his head. "Barely, and surviving isn't the same as living." Serena gave a small smile, but her eyes were still. "Wary, they will come," she whispered. "Not the elders. The others, the ones who believe I brought shame to the warrior clans." "I know," Elias said, walking to the wall and opening a small locker. He pulled out an old sidearm. "Earth-made, reliable, fully charged. You expect to fight them?" she asked, surprised. "I expect they'll be stupid enough to try," Elias answered. "Checking the weapon's power level, and I don't like surprises outside." In the dark spine of the station, several figures moved quietly. They wore light armor, no symbols, no clan markings. Their faces were hidden behind masks. These were not official guards or council agents. These were mercenaries hired in secret. Derelek, the warrior who had once fought beside Serena's late husband, stood in the shadows watching the room through a cracked monitor feed. His jaw clenched. She gave herself to a human. He growled, "That child should have been raised by one of us, not some earthbred outcast." One of the masked men beside him chuckled. "Orders." "Scare him," Derelek said. "Make the human leave. Make the widow regret her choice." Back in the room, Serena sat beside her daughter, gently brushing her hair. "You know," she said softly. She laughed once, just once, since the war, and it was today, when you gave her that food bar. Elias smiled faintly. Then it was worth it. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The door hissed slightly, but didn't open. Elias stood instantly, gun in hand. His eyes narrowed at the door's control panel. "Stay behind me," he said calmly. The moment the door opened, they rushed in. 3 masked attackers, fast and silent, blades drawn, stun sticks ready. But Elias was faster. The first attacker lunged, and Elias stepped sideways, grabbing the arm and slamming him into the wall. The second one swung a baton. But Elias ducked and fired a stun round into his chest. The third one reached for Serena until Serena moved with a warrior's instinct. She grabbed a heavy lamp from the table and struck him across the head. The man collapsed instantly. When the fight ended, 3 bodies lay unconscious on the floor. Elias checked them quickly. "They're not from any clan," he said. Merc Serena was breathing hard, still holding the lamp. "They tried to touch my daughter," she said coldly. I won't let that happen again." Vera didn't cry. She walked over slowly and stood between Elias and her mother, looking down at the attackers with wide eyes. Then she reached up and held both their hands, one in each small palm, outside the room. Derelek watched the monitor, shocked. The human hadn't just protected them, he fought like one of them, and the widow. She had defended her claim. He turned off the monitor, furious. "This isn't over," he growled. But inside the small room, a bond had formed stronger than any ritual, stronger than any law. They weren't just three strangers anymore. They were a clan now, and anyone who tried to break that would face them all. They thought the human was soft. They saw his gentle voice, his calm eyes, the way he offered food to a child, and they believed he was weak. But they were wrong, very wrong. Word of the attack spread fast across Galactic Station Tormenine. Some whispered that mercenaries had been hired to scare the human away. Others said they came to test him, to see if he would back down. But no one expected what came next. Captain Elias Knox did not run. He did not file a complaint with the council. Instead, he requested the old training hall, the one used by warriors to prove their honor. It was an open challenge, and everyone knew it by Torvalin custom. When a guardian was challenged, he had the right to answer not in words, but in combat, and Elias had chosen combat. The warriors laughed at first. "A human in our arena." Derelek sneered. "He won't last one round," but the arena was packed that night. Not because they expected a fight, but because they expected a lesson for the human. Elias stood alone on the sand-covered floor. His earth-forged armor was worn and simple, designed for function, not ceremony, but his stance. That told a different story. Serena and Vera watched from the upper level. Her hands tightly held her daughter's. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with something else, respect. Derelek entered the arena with a roar, clad and polished. Torvalin battle gear, a double-bladed glaive humming in his grip. "You've insulted our ways long enough," he said. "This ends now." Elias didn't speak. He simply nodded once and moved the moment the horn sounded. Derelek charged like a war beast. His blade swung wide and deadly, aimed straight for Elias's chest. But the human wasn't there. He had already rolled under the swing and delivered a brutal punch to Derelek's ribs. The warrior stumbled. Surprised by the speed, the crowd leaned forward, silent now. Elias fought with precision, not like a wild fighter, but like a man who had trained for years on battlefields where one mistake meant death. He didn't waste energy. He didn't show off. He simply dismantled his opponent piece by piece. Derelek tried again and again, each attack stronger, more furious, but Elias was always faster, always one step ahead. Finally, with one last spin, Elias swept Derelek's leg from beneath him and dropped him flat on his back. The glaive clattered to the floor. Elias stood over him, breathing slow and steady. "This is your last warning," he said. "Touch them again, and I won't stop at mercy." The crowd erupted, not with cheers, but with stunned silence. No human had ever defeated a Torvalin warrior in open combat. Not like this. Not clean, not so controlled. Derelek growled in humiliation, but he didn't move. His pride was shattered in front of his own people. Serena's eyes filled with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She looked down at Vera, who smiled, whispering, "He's strong, like Papa." Later that night, Elias sat alone in the room, cleaning the bruises on his knuckles. Serena entered quietly. Holding a warm cloth, she knelt beside him and gently took his hand. "You didn't have to fight him," she said. "Yes, I did," Elias replied. "You gave me your trust. I had to show them I could carry it." Serena didn't speak for a moment. Then she said something she hadn't said since her husband's death. "Thank you." He looked at her. Really looked at her. "You're not alone anymore," he said. Neither is Vera. A knock sounded at the door. Elias stood alert, but it was not another attacker. 'Twas a young Torvaloon, one of the traders holding a basket of food. And a note. The council didn't send this, the boy said, but some of us. We think what you did was right. He placed the basket down and bowed slightly to Serena. You were never the shame, he said. We were. Then he left. Serena stared at the basket, her hands shaking slightly. The rules had not only been broken, they were being rewritten by a human who chose to fight not for glory, but for a widow and a silent child. And now the station would never be the same again. Morning on Galactic Station Tormenine was never quiet, but today 'twas different. The usual noise of trade, of engines and announcements, still echoed through the halls, but beneath it all there was a shift. Something unspoken, yet powerful. It wasn't just about a widow anymore, or a child, or a human making an odd decision. It was about change. Captain Elias Knox stood by the large window of the station's observation deck. Staring out into the stars, his uniform still carried the dust and scratches from the fight, but he looked calm. Beside him stood Lady Serena, no longer wearing her mourning robes. She had shed them that morning, a silent ritual of moving forward. Her long, silver-black hair flowed freely down her back, her posture straight and proud, and beside her, little Vera, her hand wrapped tightly in Elias's. They looked like a family. And for the first time they were. A message came through the cum panel behind them. Elias turned and tapped it. A hologram of Elder Yavra appeared, her face soft. With something close to respect, Captain Elias, she said, the council has finished deliberations. Elias didn't move. And? Yavra nodded. Your claim stands. Serena let out a breath she had been holding for days. The challenge has been accepted by the clans. Yavra continued. Daralek has withdrawn his protest. You have proven your right, not just by ritual, but by honor. Elias glanced at Serena and Vera. Good, he said simply, but there is more. Yavra added, you have started something, whether you meant to or not. Others are talking, some with anger, but many with curiosity. There are others, like Serena, others cast aside. They are watching now, Elias replied. Then let them watch. The hologram faded. Serena looked up at him. You changed them, she said, without even trying to. Elias shrugged. I just didn't want to see you suffer. But still, she said gently, you chose us. He turned toward her, really looking at her. Of course I did, because you and Vera weren't broken. You were just left behind, and I know what that feels like. Serena stepped closer, her voice low. Then let us say it properly. She knelt before him, as tradition required. Vera followed. Mimicking her mother's movements by the law of bond and blood, Serena said, we, the claimed, now choose you, willingly and forever. Vera whispered, forever, Elias. Surprised, knelt with them and placed one hand over each of theirs. Then I accept, willingly and forever. The ritual was now sealed on both ends, not just by law, but by choice, outside the observation window. A small ship prepared to leave dock. It carried Daralek, silent in defeat. He watched from his own viewport as the human stood with the widow and her child. Not as a stranger, but as one of them. Some part of him, the part not poisoned by pride, understood something he hadn't before. That maybe, just maybe, strength wasn't always about power. Sometimes it was about protection. Back on the station, Elias, Serena, and Vera walked through the central halls, and this time the aliens didn't look away. Some bowed their heads in respect. Others simply moved aside. Not in fear, but in quiet acceptance. The story of the human who claimed the widow had already become legend. But to Elias, it wasn't a story. It was just the beginning. They passed a child who was sitting alone, crying softly. Serena knelt beside him and asked gently, Where is your clan?" The child looked up. Gone. Vera walked over and handed the boy her small toy, a worn, carved figure from her old world. The boy smiled, just a little, and Elias knew. The world they came from, the one ruled by silence, exile, and shame, was ending, and something better had begun, because in the dark corners of the galaxy, where rules were written in stone, one human had written something new, in kindness, in courage, in family. They were no longer claimed by tradition. They were claimed by choice, and no power in the stars could undo that now.